Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth from the Community Library, and today I'm going to be showing you how to start your family tree. So this program is just going to be more of a general overview of things to get you started. I'm not going to go super into detail into a lot of stuff, but this is just going to give you, like I said, a bigger picture of how to get started. If you registered for the program, there is a kit with a bunch of forms and information that I'm going to talk about, and I'll be referencing those forms throughout the presentation. So the first thing you'll want to think about is, why are you interested in your family history? So this can be anything from you want to share with your family, um, your collective history, or maybe you want to learn about your heritage, where your family came from, or it can even be finding lost relatives, stuff like that. And although this isn't like critical for doing your family tree, it can really help you stay motivated and focused if you're just always thinking about what is motivating you and why you're interested. So the first thing I'll go over is just um, as an example, kind of my genealogy story and why I like genealogy. Um, one thing I'll note, I have my email there throughout the program or video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I always love talking about genealogy stuff, so my email is always open. So I've been doing genealogy research for about 6 or 7 years now, kind of on and off. Sometimes I do it more than I do other times. But what really got me interested is I'm adopted, and so my main motivation was finding relatives and also just learning about where I come from. As an adoptee, that's a big motivation. You don't really know where your family is from, so that was a big motivation for me. So I'm reunited with some of my biological family, so I've been able to do that side of the family tree, and I also work on my adopted family's family tree. I also have some experience with DNA testing, which I'll briefly talk about, and um, how to interpret the results of your tests, because I know that's a way that a lot of people get into genealogy. I also um, really love reading old newspapers. That's kind of my favorite thing to research. And I'll kind of talk about it throughout, but my storage and organization of my research is kind of a mess. That's a work in progress. But that's just a little bit about me and my background with genealogy. So we'll kind of get into how to get started. So the first thing I think it's important to mention, and this might be a little backwards, is you'll want to think about where you want to keep your family tree, where you want to build your family tree. Because as you're doing research and kind of gathering information, you're going to want to put it somewhere. And before we start, I think it's a good idea to kind of mention these. So there's a couple here. So there's websites, or there's software you can install on your computer, or you can even keep a physical copy of your family tree. So I'll kind of go over those. So Ancestry.com is probably by far the most popular. You've definitely heard about it before. Um, so it has probably the most resources, and they also own a lot of the websites related to genealogy. So if you are familiar with something like findagrave.com or newspapers.com, they are owned by Ancestry, and they just have kind of taken over the genealogy um, landscape, kind of. However, um, creating an account is free, and you can also create your tree for free. But there are certain things that will need to have a subscription for. So you've probably heard of these things called hints. They're little leaves on Ancestry. You'll be able to, I think, look at them, but to be able to see the actual source or add it to your tree, you will have to have a subscription, which can be pretty pricey. So it just depends on what you want. There's also a website called familysearch.org. So this is run by the Latter-day Saints. And it's a free and public website that you can make your family tree on. So all you have to do is make an account to be able to create your tree. However, the way Family Search works is that it's kind of like a big public tree. So they're trying to make like the biggest family tree, collective family tree. So when you add somebody to your tree, um, it's actually not your own tree. People will be able to make changes to it, and you might not like that. So that's just something to think about. So those are probably the two biggest websites. Um, Over on the right here, I have two different software. So there are different programs you can download and install on your computer if you use your computer a lot. So there's one called Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker. Roots Magic has a free version, um, and Family Tree Maker does cost money to purchase. So these are great if you want something more permanent on your computer. You can use that. Um, they do have different features, so you might want to look at the different ones before you decide on what to use. So, and there's a lot more than this that I'm mentioning, but like I said, I kind of wanted to give a bigger picture. So these are probably the most popular, but if you want to, you can do some more research into the different options. And no matter what, as you're recording information on your family members and building your tree, it's probably a good idea to save physical copies either to your computer or on your flash drive, something like that, just because websites can change. They lose collections, or maybe you decide to stop subscribing to something that costs money. And so then you won't have access to that if you stop subscribing. So, like, for example, newspapers.com, some of their papers that they have, their old papers, are you can only look at with a subscription. So if you are using that website, you save something to the website, but not to your computer, you won't be able to see it if you stop paying for the subscription. So it's a good idea to either save copies, either physical copies, you can even print them, just so you have it later on if you're looking for it. And this is kind of where organizing comes into play. So you can organize by surname, like the family last name, or by the type of resource that you're using. So that's just basically an overview of the different options for your family tree. Um, but let's get started into what it actually takes to start getting everything into your tree. So in the kit, I included a couple forms. Um, Forms like the ancestor chart and the family group sheet or individual worksheets. So these are paper forms that you can use to kind of get organized before you enter your information onto an online tree. Um, so no matter what, you want to start with yourself and work backwards. So it's basically just starting with what you know. So you probably know the most about yourself, and then working backwards into your extended family toward the unknown. So it just makes it easier to kind of get everything organized. And like I said, you want to use the forms such as family group sheets and ancestor charts, which are also called pedigree charts. Um, so a good idea is to also start with recording the vital information first. So vital information is um, the main facts about a person's life. So birth, marriage, and death dates and locations, to start with what you know. So here's just an example of an ancestor chart or pedigree chart. It looks a little different than the one I included in the kit, but it's kind of the same idea. So this is more of a big picture of your family. So, and it's your direct family. So here you would start with yourself and then work back to your parents, their parents, so your grandparents, and back and back and back. And it only records things like their birthdays, marriage, and death. So this is more of a big picture. It can really help you um, get that overview of your family and what kind of information you know. So start just by with one of these and try and record as much as you know. And here on the next one, I have an example of what's a family group sheet. So here, it's more of a zoomed in picture of a family unit. So you could record this for yourself or your parents. All it is it records the information about the husband, the wife, and the children. And here you're also able to include more information and um, different things. But again, it can help you just kind of get started. And also, I included an individual worksheet, which is kind of even more zoomed in. So that would just be about one person in your family. And I'll mention too, all of the forms that I included, um, I do have the physical copies, but if you look at this website on the bottom here, familysearch.org, the genealogy research forms, there are tons of copies if you ever want to print more, or there are also forms that are able to be edited on the computer. So once you've started with yourself, then you can start working on your family members. So to stay focused, you probably, when you're first starting out, want to focus on your immediate family and direct family members. So your spouse, your children, your siblings, and your parents. Um, you don't really want to go right into your aunts and uncles and maybe your grandparents, siblings. Start with your immediate family, and then once you get everything for them, you can start working on more extended family. You also want to, at this point, start gathering what you have around the house. So these can be things that can help you fill in information, even on like vital information. Maybe you have birth certificates or death certificates around the house. Or it can just give you information about a person's life. So things like diaries, obituaries, letters, family Bibles, stuff that you have that maybe you haven't looked at in a while, that's just around the house. And when you're doing this too, you want to kind of try and keep track of what you find, just so you know what you have, basically. And you can also, at this point, try talking to your family members or even family friends. You can ask them questions about what they remember, or about what their life was like, or they might even have done some of their research of their own and have information that can save you time. And a lot of the times, too, they might have pictures, which are always great. So on the right here, you'll see I just included this in the kit as well, but I also have some information on just some different questions to ask if you are stumped on what to ask a family member about their life. And I also have an example here of a research log. So this is when I talked about keeping track of what you're finding. A research log is a great thing to use to stay organized. So it can help you identify what you've already looked for or haven't been able to find, and then it can save yourself some time later on. And like the other forms, I have the link on the bottom here for different options of research logs that you can use um, if you don't like the one that I included. So now that you have started recording information about what you know and what your family knows, you might have noticed that there are things that are missing. So maybe something that no one can remember, or you've just hit a wall after maybe your grandparents and you are missing information. So now we want to start thinking about how to start searching for information that we want to know. So a great place to start is thinking about what you want to know. And once you decide that, you want to kind of phrase it in the form of a research question. So this is a great way to stay focused, because when you're first starting out, especially, it can be really overwhelming, all the information that's available, and it can be easy to kind of jump around when you're first getting started. So focusing on one research question at a time can help you um, figure out where you want to start and focus on one person in your family tree. So one example of a research question might be um, maybe you have kind of started looking at the census information, census records that are available, but you want to find where was my family in the 1930 census. So that would be a great place to start. So you would be able to go search census records, and then look for your family. And that would just give you a focus when you're searching. A great place to start, if you can't think of something, is starting with the vital records and vital information. So, like I mentioned before, these are things like birth, marriage, death, and burial. And they're usually accompanied by um, documents or certificates that are given by the state. So these are a great place to start. It's good to fill in this information before you start looking for other stuff, um, like other information. And depending on the state, these might either be really easy to find or there might only be an index available that will only have the basic information. And you won't be able to see the actual certificates without paying for them. Um, if you can't find the actual certificates, you can also use other documents to give you an idea. So, usually in the census, they will record the birth year and where they were born. It changes depending on the census, but it can be a great place to get the general dates for those vital records and vital information. And another thing I would advise doing is using free resources. So when you're first starting out, you're probably not going to want to pay for an Ancestry subscription. It can be really great, but it's a great place to just start with the free resources and then work, see what you are missing to buy subscriptions to things. So, for example, we have Ancestry Library Edition for free at the library. So you can't build a tree with it, but you can search it for free at the library. And there's also different things like Family Search is free. And I'll be talking a little bit later about all the different things you can use to find information. But first, let's talk about just some little research tips and procedures. Um, so I mentioned before, you really want to try to record whatever information you find. So this can be things like maybe your grandma is telling you your great grandfather's birth date. Record that information and who told you or where you found it. This is mostly just saving yourself later on. So if you're trying to find information or um, if you're searching for something, you don't want to search for it twice. So keeping track of what you found really helps. It's also a good idea to create a to-do list of things that are missing that maybe you want to search for, um, and things you want to find. So, example, if you are missing birthdays, marriages, maybe you're missing obituaries, try and keep track of that. Again, it'll just save you time later on. And I did include in the kit, there's a research checklist and a records checklist, which can keep track of different sources or different information that you're missing for an ancestor. And just two different technical things to mention. Dates can be kind of confusing um, if they're not written in a standard way. So we want to record all years with the full 4 digits. So just as an example, if you're looking at something maybe you found in your house and it says the year was 89. Well, in genealogy, we're going back into the past. So that could be 1989 or 1889. So to avoid that confusion, you want to record the full 4 years or full 4 digits of the year. And then you also want to record it in the European way. So it'll be the day, the month, and then the year. And that's just the standard used in genealogy. And it's also good to keep track of surnames that you find or that you're looking for. Um, One thing to do with maiden names, when you're recording the women in your family tree, you want to record them with their maiden last name, not their married name. Because when you are attaching them to their spouse in the family tree, it's implied that they did take their last name, but to make it easier for yourself, use their maiden name. You can also record surnames in all caps to easily identify them. That's used a lot in genealogy. And you also want to kind of keep a list of different spellings you find. So, just as an example here, you'll notice that spellings will change. So these are two examples from the census. One from 1920. I was missing for a long time because I could not find them because the last name was so different. And the reason this happens sometimes is that if people came over to America from a different country, if they said their name out loud with an accent, sometimes the people recording them would spell it differently than they actually spelled it. So if you keep track of all these different spellings, it can help you when you're searching later on. Okay, so now that we've gone over kind of the basics, here are some recommendations on where to start searching. As you'll notice, there's a lot of information here, and I'm not even going over probably half of what's available, but these are just some that I wanted to highlight. Um, what I would advise is just kind of trying one at a time, seeing what you can find, um, and don't get too overwhelmed. And in the brochure and the kit, I did include links, but if you can't find any of these, I would just advise either going to our library website, communitylib.org, or you can even just Google the name of any of these and it'll usually pop up. So the first resources I wanted to highlight are the online library resources. So these are all free, available through the library or through the area. So we have Ancestry Library Edition and Heritage Quest Online. These both are free and you can use them at home with your library card. All you have to do is just log in, and they kind of complement each other. Some collections are available on Ancestry only, some are available on Heritage Quest only. There's also BadgerLink genealogy resources, which is available through the state of Wisconsin. One that I want to highlight there is we have the newspapers.com Worlds collection available through BadgerLink. There's also the Kenosha County Library System. We have a digital archive, and these are local things like we have some yearbooks and different collections to look through there. We also have digital access to Family Tree magazine through Overdrive that you can check out and read. They also have back issues available, and those are just more about how to do genealogy research. And another kind of local thing I wanted to highlight was the UW Parkside Archives. So they have a lot of local Kenosha resources, things like court records. Those are available through Parkside. And there's a couple fun essential websites. One is Cindy's List. This is kind of an index of genealogy websites. If there is a genealogy website, it is probably referenced on Cindy's List, and it's all categorized so you can kind of drill down and look for, say you wanted to look for Wisconsin birth records, you'll be able to find all the websites related to that on Cindy's List. There's also the Family Search Wiki, which I mentioned familysearch.org earlier, but this is their research wiki. So on there, they have a lot of guidelines, different guides, different state research tips, and it's just a really great resource. And then there's Recollection Wisconsin, which is photos, maps, and books about Wisconsin history. Chronicling America is America's Historic Newspapers by the Library of Congress. So these are papers from 1836 to 1922. And that can kind of complement newspapers.com, which is a subscription site, but you can read some for free. There's also Find a Grave, which is pretty much any cemetery has a Find a Grave site that you can look at and find your ancestors there. Google Books is good to search for county histories, and older books are available on Google Books. There's also archive.org and plenty more. Like I said, I'm not even getting into the tip of the iceberg here, but those are just some ones that I wanted to highlight. There's also local organizations you can use as a resource. So if you are focusing in on a certain, maybe even county or town, it can be good to use the local genealogy society or even the local public library website. Most library websites will have a genealogy page, which they'll have all the information about where to find resources about local history. Some local examples here, we have the Kenosha History Center, Kenosha Historical Society, Burlington Historical Society, and Wisconsin Historical Society. And they all have websites which have great resources on them. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight a couple things we have physically in the library. Here at Salem, we have a few local history books about local townships and villages. I believe we have one of each for everything except for Paddock Lake. And at the Twin Lakes branch, we do have the book Summer Enchantment about Twin Lakes. And there's also the Share catalog, which is our online catalog where you can request items from any library in Kenosha, Racine, Walworth, or Rock County. And there you can look and see what other books they have about their local history, like, say, Racine history or Kenosha history. And we also have books about the history of Wisconsin and different immigrant populations in Wisconsin, and also books about general genealogy research, like tips and tricks and stuff like that. So here, I just have an example of where to go to find the online resources on the community library website. So it's communitylib.org, and once this is the home page, and on the left you'll see there's a bunch of different options. You want to click online databases, and that will take you to this page with this grid with all of our different resources. So there's Ancestry Library Edition. So that's a good place to go just to kind of see what's there. And I also have a video that was made previously for our YouTube channel about how to use Ancestry Library Edition. So the link is down there. But if you're just on YouTube, you can always just search Salem and Twin Lakes Community Library and our channel will pop up. And it's about 20 minutes, and I kind of go more in depth on how to use that. And also I wanted to highlight just the Kenosha Public Library's resources. So their website is mykpl.info, and they have a genealogy and local history page. And at Southwest, they have a lot of files and microfilm on Kenosha history, if you're into that. And so here, finally, for resources, it's very overwhelming, but if you are looking for more specific recommendations, Family Tree Magazine just released their top 101 best genealogy websites for 2021. And they kind of break it down into categories, but you can go there. And here in the center, I just have some recommendations from the Wisconsin Historical Society, broken down based on what you're looking for and which website to go to. And also different options on where to look if you're looking for physical collections. And that's kind of the overview on how to get started searching. If you need more help, like I said, I always recommend the Family Search Wiki. The link down there, they have a great step-by-step on how to begin your genealogy quest. And it goes a little bit more in depth than I'm able to in this video. And lastly, I kind of want to just talk about DNA testing. So I know a lot of people get into genealogy by doing their DNA test with like Ancestry or 23andMe. So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. Depending on if you haven't already done a DNA test, you can use any of the DNA websites. Ancestry is the most used, so generally, depending on your family, you'll probably get the most matches on Ancestry, if that's what you're looking for. However, once you get your results, some websites will allow you to download your DNA results and then upload them to a different website. I believe MyHeritage does this. You can also use GEDmatch, or Prometheus will do like health reports. I believe there's a cost to it, but there's different options. So you don't have to do multiple DNA tests. You can use the resources available. Another thing is that when you're testing, unless the match is your parent, they're probably going to show up as a cousin. That's what Ancestry or any of these websites kind of predict. So what they're labeled by how much DNA you share with your match. So like I said, unless they're your parent, they'll usually be listed as a cousin. Um, so if you want to figure out how you're related to that person, you'll probably have to do a little bit more digging or get in touch with them, or you can do some different problem solving. So one website for this that's great is dnapainter.com. You can insert how much DNA you share, and it'll kind of give you a few different options on what their relationship might be. And I also included some different relationship and cousin charts that you can use to kind of figure out how you're related to them or what kind of cousin they are. Another thing, like I said, don't be afraid to be open to communication. You might have to get in touch with people to figure out how you're related, and it'll generally happen through the website. So you can keep an eye on your messages, but also if you message someone, um, be prepared that you might not hear back from them. Sometimes it's hard to get in touch with people through these websites. That's kind of a overview of DNA testing. And then I also wanted to show here, so this is just an example of one of the charts. It's similar to the ones that I included, but you can see um, kind of parse out what kind of cousin you are based on your match, because it can get pretty confusing. And also just a note on ethnicity. The main thing to note here is that they are just estimates. So some people think when they do their DNA test, it's set in stone. Like this is my DNA results, my ethnicity results. However, they are really based on whatever company you test with. They have their own data they use and the way they break down information. And it depends on the sample size they have. Um, so it'll change over time as more people test, and also it'll change as they kind of change how they break down the information. So here, I just have an example of myself. So this is Ancestry, just 2 years apart. It's pretty much the same. Ancestry recently, they did break out Scotland into its own section. So a lot of people were confused. Why is Scotland suddenly on my results? That's just because Ancestry changed how they reported that information. And also, just to contrast, there's my 23andMe results compared to how Ancestry breaks it down. There's not really a big difference, it just is what you prefer. And you can see here, so 23andMe includes German in Northwestern European, but Ancestry has its own Germanic Europe section. So it just changes how it's reported. Um, Mostly what I just advise is just have fun with the ethnicity results. It's not meant to be a concrete thing. Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to talk about some of the more fun stuff related to doing your family tree and getting started with genealogy. Um, so things like talking to other people who are also interested in genealogy is really fun. I have a lot of fun doing it. So one thing you can do is join different groups, either genealogy societies, which are great for um, local research and getting involved with your local family history. Here at the library, we also have a genealogy networking group, which meets once a month. Right now, it's still virtual on Zoom, but we just talk about different things that we're stuck on our research or different things that have come up. It's just really casual discussion. You can also read blogs and different news sites. So I really like reading them for getting tips about doing research and learning about things that are going on in genealogy. And also, people will sometimes post like family stories, which are great just to read. I think they're really fun to read. So I just have some of my favorite examples there as links. Another thing is Facebook groups. So, as you probably know, if you have Facebook, groups are pretty active, especially genealogy groups. And if you can think of something, there's probably a Facebook group for it. So here are just a couple that I'm part of. But like I said, there's if you can think of it, there's probably a Facebook group for it. And here at the bottom, I have a link for Family Search. They have a page for every Facebook group that they have made for the different countries. They have different states. if there's a Facebook group, it's listed there, or you can do some searching on your own on Facebook and see what's there. Okay, and that is all I had for today. Hopefully, this gave you just some information that will help you get started doing your family history and genealogy. Like I said, feel free to email me with any questions or get in touch. I have her contact information there. And thanks for watching.